Let's go to NBC News White House correspondent Vaughn Hillyard for more on this. Also with us, PBS NewsHour co-anchor and MSNBC political contributor Geoff Bennett, and here on set with me, NBC News senior executive editor David Rohde. Vaughn, for 3 weeks now, this story has dominated Washington, and the president has been unable to really change the subject, which is unusual for him. Does the administration have a strategy to move forward at this point?
The strategy right now appears to try to take this actually head on, and that is where you see the Department of Justice going forward with that interview with Ghislaine Maxwell, with the Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche. There's a question as to whether those transcripts from that day and a half of behind closed doors conversation between the DOJ and Maxwell will be released publicly. Senate Judiciary Democrats have put in a request to have those transcripts turned over to their colleagues in the Senate. This is a moment also that the president, though, has moved forward with a lawsuit against the Wall Street Journal and called yesterday in a filing from his legal team for an expedited deposition of Rupert Murdoch, the head of the parent company of the Wall Street Journal, citing his 94-year-old age and questions over whether he will be healthy enough to potentially go during trial and testify. And so at the same time that the president seemingly wants to talk about anything but Jeffrey Epstein, he is also not backing down from questions that are being directed his way about it and continues to provide more fodder as to exactly what is in those files that the Department of Justice has yet to unseal.
Yeah, Geoff, the president seems to be trying to avoid some straightforward questions about Epstein. He did file that $10 billion lawsuit with the B over an Epstein story. He's trying to morph it into this Obama conspiracy. These are typical President Trump tactics that his opponents have been frustrated with for years. Why now are those same tactics frustrating his base?
Yeah, look, Ana, you can argue that the president's attempts at damage control on Epstein in many ways are making it worse in the sense that it's giving this enveloping scandal staying power. For instance, just yesterday, the president said he ended his friendship with Epstein and kicked him out of his Mar-a-Lago club because Epstein more than once hired people that used to work for Donald Trump. Well, just days earlier, the White House communications director Stephen Chung said that no, Trump kicked Epstein out of his Mar-a-Lago club, in Chung's words, because Epstein was a creep. Well, which is it? Now, look, there's no evidence of any wrongdoing by President Trump in his former relationship with Epstein, but you could also make the case that the strategy that the administration has for dealing with this at least underestimated, miscalculated the level of outrage among some of the president's base. And this all started because of MAGA conspiracy theories that Jeffrey Epstein didn't commit suicide in prison, that he was in fact murdered and left behind this list of powerful officials, a deep state cabal of Democrats. This was a conspiracy theory that was promoted in many ways by Donald Trump, by Pam Bondi, by Kash Patel. Those two folks now occupy and hold great power in the administration. And so Bondi's refusal to release the documents really adds to more questions and has created this rupture within the base. And to your point, Ana, this scandal has had staying power to the degree that no other Trump professional or personal scandal has.
Yeah, David, the Washington Post actually describes the state of play as a firestorm of criticism that has consumed all three branches of government. How remarkable is that?
It's very unusual, and what was so unusual was that the Deputy Attorney General went down to Florida and met with Ghislaine Maxwell for 2 days. It was roughly 9 hours of questioning. And you can see there's already questions about who was there. In a normal interview like that, first of all, many former prosecutors said it's unprecedented to have a Deputy Attorney General do that interview. Normally it'd be a prosecutor who worked on that case. And he may have had another person there, but normally you would want a prosecutor, an FBI agent there to be a witness who could testify or just corroborate what Maxwell said. But at this point, we're only confirmed that it was Maxwell, Todd Blanche, and Maxwell's lawyer. And again, there could be more people, but that's what's raised all these suspicions. There was a headline you flashed earlier about Democrats, Senator Durbin, demanding to know what happened in that interview, and that's the mystery here.
Well, and Blanche even sort of dangled out in a social media post, stay tuned. He didn't say that, I'm paraphrasing, but ultimately did say what was disclosed will come at a later time.
There's one scenario here, which, again, former prosecutors have speculated about, and it would be a huge political risk, but that you could have Ghislaine Maxwell issue a statement saying Donald Trump, did not abuse any girls. And that may well be true. I just want to emphasize what Geoff said, that there's no evidence of wrongdoing against President Trump. But in exchange, she would get maybe her sentence commuted. I don't think that would end this controversy. If anything, it would fuel it more. The more likely thing is that the White House just tries to stop talking about it and hopes it goes away. But the release of these transcripts, that was one thing the Justice Department did with all this pressure, the transcripts of the grand jury proceedings in New York, that will not be finished until late August. That will fuel the story. On August 5th, the House Oversight Committee, I think it's August 11th actually, is sitting down. They're probably going to send a staffer down to interview Maxwell in federal prison. That will fuel the story.
And that's a couple weeks away. So you can see this continuing at least until then and likely well beyond that. Vaughn, one thing that's come out in terms of just the questions people have been asking since this latest Epstein news broke, since that memo a couple of weeks ago is, what exactly was the falling out between President Trump and Epstein? What did he know about Epstein's behavior, et cetera? And I know Geoff touched on this. He was asked exactly what happened. What was the falling out you had with him yesterday while he was in Scotland? Here's what he answered.
That's such old history, very easy to explain, but I don't want to waste your time by explaining it. But for years, I wouldn't talk to Jeffrey Epstein. I wouldn't talk because he did something that was inappropriate. He hired help, and I said, don't ever do that again. He stole people that worked for me. I said, don't ever do that again. He did it again, and I threw him out of the place, persona non grata. I threw him out, and that was it.
Vaughn, that's the first time I'd heard that specific kind of answer. Does that help take suspicion off him personally? And how does it track with what he said in the past?
Right, and there was previous Washington Post reporting that there was potential disagreement and discrepancies over a real estate deal down in Palm Beach. And this, though, for the president, it directly counters what his communications director, as Geoff noted, has said for weeks now, that he had kicked him out of his club because he was a creep and had stopped associating with him. But I think we have to go back to the very first remarks there that the president just spoke from Scotland. And that was specifically, I don't want to waste your time, that it's old history. And that hits at the heart of the questions, that President Trump knows more than 10 years worth of history of Jeffrey Epstein. And while he may not have been aware of criminal wrongdoing by Epstein, the president himself last year, in October of 24, was alleged by a woman who was not underage, Stacey Johnson, alleged that she was brought to Trump Tower by Jeffrey Epstein and that the sitting president of the United States groped her. His campaign at the time has denied it, but the president has never taken on those allegations directly. And this hits at the heart of just exactly what was their relationship like. And the president has never gone in detail in any interview or otherwise. And I think that is, again, why you are seeing the Senate Judiciary Democrats, Dick Durbin and Sheldon Whitehouse, suggest in their letter to the Department of Justice that they are concerned about a, quote, corrupt bargain with Ghislaine Maxwell if a pardon or a commutation were to be offered, and why they are requesting the transcripts in full from those 9 hours of conversation last week in Tallahassee.
David, Maxwell is the only person connected to this Epstein case that's been convicted of a crime here. And now we know her lawyers are appealing to the Supreme Court to try to have her conviction overturned or throw out. What's their argument?
Their argument is that there was an agreement in the first investigation in Florida, which was very heavily criticized. That was under George W. Bush. It was a plea deal for Jeffrey Epstein. He just pled guilty to state charges. But that said, no co-conspirators would be prosecuted. What's happened? His lawyers are saying that deal in Florida should apply to the entire country. She never should have been prosecuted in New York. The big thing to look for next is Republican town halls around the country during this recess. Do they all ask about Epstein? If they do, more pressure on Republicans. And
there have been calls for members of the president's key cabinet, including the Attorney General, to be, ousted over all of this. Geoff, does the president still have confidence in his team at the helm there? Bondi, Kash Patel, Don Bongino.
Well, he certainly says he does. And there's been some reporting that suggests that President Trump believes that were he to fire any of them, it would only add to this to this scandal. So we will see where this leads. The one thing we shouldn't lose sight, though, of is the victims. I mean, federal officials have said, federal investigators have said that there were some 1,000 women and girls, some as young as 12, who were sex trafficked, who were groomed and abused over the years by Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. So when you hear Republicans, MAGA folks say this whole thing is a hoax, that part of it certainly is not a hoax.